everybody. Welcome along to the Spectator's review of the political year 2025. What do you think to the set, eh? How festive have we got? Round of applause for the set before we've even started putting anyone on it. So many bottles of fizz lying around. It's a bit like number 10 during lockdown. But in fact, this fizz is the very fizz that you have a chance of winning within the first 10 minutes. God, it's sounding like giving me Bruce Forsyth woos now. This is fantastic. Because you can see there are 5 chairs here. You're going to get 5 very intelligent people, clever political types, going to be sitting in those chairs in a few minutes, guiding you through all the wonderful and not so wonderful things that have happened this year. But we decided before you got those, you'd have to put up with me for a few minutes. They write all the clever stuff at the front of the magazine. My name's Mark Mason. I sometimes write the flippant, trivial pieces towards the back of the magazine. Usually at the moment, it tends to be in a notes on. Any notes on fans in? Thank God for that. There was a second before we got... I thought, please let them not all be serious political types who stop reading as soon as they get to notes on. But anyway, I've done such things as notes on lists of words who share no letters with the word mackerel, for instance. Are you getting a feel for the intellectual level we're operating at here? And for instance, one of those was the tube station, St John's Wood, is the only tube station that shares no letters with the word mackerel, which correct response to a fact like that. I like your thinking here, this is good. And I mentioned that at a previous talk, and in the questions at the end, a woman put her hand up and she said, do you know the Pimlico fact? We're very near Pimlico tube station here. I said I didn't. She said Pimlico is the only tube station to share no letters with the word badger. Now, I don't know if we're going to get that sort of insight from a Spectator audience tonight, but you never know. Anyway, what you need to be doing at this point is, at some point very soon, when our friend on the desk, there we go, very soon, up on that screen, if anyone wants to point their phone at that QR code there, that will open up the app in which you are going to answer this question. 10 questions at the beginning. You'll be relieved to hear that the 5 clever people sitting in the green room backstage managed between them to get all 10 right. So, but once you've got that up and running, and people watching along at home will be able to do the same, once you're up and running with that, you'll be able to fill in the answers as we go. Those of you that get 10 out of 10, you're Spectator readers. Clearly, lots of you are going to get 10 out of 10. Those names will go into a hat, and we will draw one name out of that hat, and that person will get a bottle of the Old Queen Street Fizz. Oh, the tension rises in the audience already. So, if we kick off with our first question tonight, all of these, by the way, roughly relate to... Incidentally, before we start the quiz, did anyone come to the readers' quiz in the garden that we did during the summer? I think there's a couple of hands going up there. And still you're here. Welcome back. Thank you very much. That was the quiz at which Michael Gove came down to the garden and sort of introduced it all. And I tested Michael on the question, what colour predominantly is Lambeth Bridge? Does anyone happen to know this? There's a political connection. Sorry? Very good. Round of applause for our friend up the back there. The correct answer is red, because it is at the House of Lords end of Parliament, which is why Westminster Bridge is green, because it's at the House of Commons end of Parliament. So, no pressure, sir, but you're in the lead with the quiz already. Hopefully by now I've given you enough time to get that QR code up and running. You're going to get 30 seconds to answer each question. Let's get you setting off with the first one. All of these relate to somebody's political highlight from the night, one of the 5 clever people. They've all chosen political highlights. The first one relates to James's highlight, which is about the Labour Party Welfare Rebellion. And we are going to talk about the 174 majority that Labour won with last year. It's a victory last year that's been called wide but shallow, secured as it was with just 9.7 million votes. The record number of votes ever received at a UK general election remains 14.1 million votes by the Conservatives in which year? That is your first question. And there we go, we've got our countdown timer going. We don't have Carol Vorderman here to stand by the counter, but I think this is a record that's going to stand forever. because turnout, we know what's happening to turnout rates, 14.1 million votes achieved by the Conservatives, in which year? You are down to your final few seconds. And then I will tell you that the correct answer is 1992. There we go. The answers are flashing up, so at least 2 of you got that right. We weren't entirely sure how this software was going to work before we started this. I'm glad to see that we're up and running. So 2 of you are in the running already. At least 2 of you, because I'm not sure that that's giving us all the answers. 1019, I really hope that was a fat finger moment. But anyway, you're Spectator readers, for God's sake. Question number 2 relates to Donald Trump. Freddy Gray is going to talk about Donald Trump. Talks about little else, Freddy Gray, talking about Donald Trump. But Trump and technology, because it's going to relate to the golden pager that Trump got given. Trump and technology. On the president's desk in the Oval Office is a red button mounted on a wooden block. Whenever Trump presses it, somebody brings him what? There is a red button mounted on a wooden block on the president's desk in the Oval Office. The Oval Office reminds us that when Barack Obama left office, he said he was looking forward to working in an office with corners. But Trump is in there at the moment with that red button. And he's told at least one journalist that people think it's the nuclear button, which, pretty scary thought with any president, but especially at the moment. The correct answer is that somebody brings him a Diet Coke. And he gets through several a day. Let's move straight on to question number 3. What role? Question number 3 also relates to Donald Trump. I'm very sorry if you're not a fan of Trump, but the man gives very good question. So we're going to go with Trump again. This is question 3. What role did Thomas Matthew Crooks play in a news story last year, 2024, involving Donald Trump? Question 3. What role did Thomas Matthew Crooks play in a 2024 news story involving Donald Trump? I'm tempted. It took the 5 clever people backstage got this fairly quickly, but not instantly. I'll give you the clue that he was 20 at the time that this news story happened. Thomas Matthew Crooks, and we are down to your final 3 seconds. The correct answer is that last year, Thomas Matthew Crooks tried to shoot Donald J. Trump. I know, isn't it incredible? Probably the biggest news story in the world last year, apart from the US election itself, and nobody remembers his name. Yes, he managed to, well, he shot Donald Trump's ear, but he didn't achieve what he wanted to. So there we go, we've got, wrote the dossier, Jeffrey Epstein's. An awful, ate his dog is my favorite wrong answer there. Well done, whoever put that down. Let's move on, question number 4. Relates to Angela Rayner, your Deputy Prime Minister at the beginning of the year, but not at the end. Angela Rayner, in November 2017, became, at 37 years old, the youngest what in the House of Commons? That's question 4. In November 2017, Angela Rayner became, aged 37, the youngest what in the House of Commons? She gave herself a nickname because of this. There's some sly looks in there. People looking confident there. And the correct answer is that at 37, she became the youngest grandmother in the House of Commons. When she was 37, so she started calling herself Grandula. Ha ha. A small piece of Angela Rayner wit there for you. Let's keep it moving. Let's get on to question number 5. This is about Shabana Mahmood. I'm going to let Tim Shipman explain later on why he's talking about Shabana Mahmood. But which of Mahmood's predecessors as Home Secretary is the only person ever to hold all 4 of the great offices of state? Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, Chancellor, Prime Minister. Only one person has ever achieved all 4 rungs up the greasy pole, if you can have a rung on a pole, but you know what I mean. Only one person ever in UK history has served as Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, and Chancellor of the Exchequer. Quite a few have got 3 out of the 4. Only one person has got all four, and that man is Jim Callahan. So congratulations if you, there you go, someone at the bottom has put Jim Callahan. Congratulations on getting that one right. Jim Callahan, who could never wear short-sleeved shirts because when he was in the Navy, he'd had tattoos up both arms. And a small lesson for the tattoo fans out there, he regretted them in later life. He could never wear short-sleeved shirts. Let's carry on. Question number 6 is another one inspired by our current Home Secretary. Shabana Mahmood is the UK's 7th female Home Secretary. Who was the first? Shabana Mahmood is the UK's 7th female Home Secretary. Who was the first? You are now halfway through your 30 seconds. You have had, considering, I'm going to be generous here, I'm going to give you a clue. Until 2007, the UK had never had any. And in the last 18 years, they have had 7. And your correct answer is Jackie Smith. Jackie Smith gets you the points there. Then it was Theresa May, Amber Rudd, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, and most recently, Yvette Cooper. Okay, question number 7. Zohran Mamdani is about to become, on January the 1st, New York's socialist mayor. So here's a Margaret Thatcher quote about socialism for you. Just want you to fill in the last word. Margaret Thatcher once said that the trouble with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's what? Oh, I love it when we like putting an easy one in just to give you a boost if you're flagging a bit, if you're not feeling too confident after earlier wrong answers. And it's so easy that even if you hadn't got it, several of the people near the front here shouted it out so loudly that you could hear it. But I'm sure you would all have got it. What else is it going to be? Even if you weren't Spectator readers and knew your political history, you would have worked that one out. The answer is, of course, the trouble with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. There we go. Look at that. There you go. I said it was meant to make you feel confident. This is like the UK at the Eurovision Song Contest when we get loads of noughts and it shows up like that. Except this time they're showing up with ticks. Well played, everyone. Let's go back to Donald Trump, shall we? He's always good for a question, like I say. And again, you've got to come up with the word that is missing out of this quote. In February this year, Donald Trump said of his own stage appearances that he could never leave the stage without doing what? And the quote is, I try and walk off sometimes without Xing. And I can't. I have to X. Which verb is X? February this year. If you think about the end of one of Donald Trump's stage appearances, I'm sure it's seared into your memories. I love it when you can see someone on the 5th row, I think actually miming what this verb is. I'm not sure, were you there? It certainly looked like it. So everyone's looking around at you now to see where you've stopped doing it. Well done. I try and leave the stage. I try and walk off sometimes without Xing, and I can't. I have to X. The correct answer is dancing. He has to dance. Or if you call that dancing, then that's what Donald is. Yes, I know. And it's always village people, isn't it? There's strange things going on here that I'm not going to start probing into Donald Trump's psyche at this time on a Westminster evening. So they're well done if you got that. It's dance. Now, this is your one non-political question. And the reason it's in is because it relates to a political story. We've got various video highlights you'll be seeing later on of Spectator contributors and friends of the magazine giving their political highlights. Matthew Paris has chosen Rachel Reeves crying at on the front bench in the House of Commons. So this is a question about the band Tears for Fears. Tears for Fears took their name from a particular form of psychotherapy. Which other British band take their name from the same form of psychotherapy? That is your penultimate question. The band Tears for Fears took their name from a particular form of psychotherapy. Which other British band? And I love it when you see people staring at the ceiling, going through possible... No, it's shaking your head. I guarantee you, sir, this falls into the category of if I have to tell you, you'll kick yourself, or you'll go, I should have got that. By the way, your editor backstage, Michael Gove, I'll tell you about him in a minute when I give you the correct answer. The correct answer is Primal Scream. Ah, there we go. So there we go. Well played if you did get that. Just a little insight into the man who's about to come out and sit in the middle chair here and chair the evening, as well as edit your magazine. Everyone was sitting around, Maddie and Tim and Freddy were sitting around thinking, looking, staring very hard at the carpet, trying to work it out. And I looked up, and Michael was sitting there with a grin on his face because he'd got it. Then I noticed he'd got his phone in both hands. He just Googled it. There we go. Maybe that's why he's the editor. I don't know, but still. It is, of course, Primal Scream, a form of therapy had by John Lennon. It became famous largely because of John Lennon. And, of course, its nickname is Tears for Fears. OK, well, let's get you up and running very quickly with everyone else. It's going to be clever for the rest of the evening after we've done our last question, which is, in August this year, during J.D. Vance's trip to Britain, he and David Lammy, then the Foreign Secretary, did something for which they did not have the required license. The fine for this can be up to £2,500 and is administered by the Environment Agency. What did they do? That's your final question. In August this year, during J.D. Vance's trip to Britain, he and David Lammy did something for which they did not have the required license. Naughty boys. The fine for this can be up to £2,500, although, of course, by the time it came around to it, Vance was back in the US, and David Lammy got a slap on the wrist. He didn't actually get the fine. The fine that is administered by the Environment Agency, and the correct answer is that they went fishing. So, well played if you got that. Give yourselves a round of applause to take part. We'll see you at the end of the evening with the answers, but other than that, thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Spectator's Year-End Review in partnership with Charles Stanley Wealth Managers. Tectonic shifts in political loyalties, mounting public dissent, and occasionally the kind of comic relief that only politics can provide. Please give a very, very warm round of applause to your host, the editor of The Spectator, Michael Gove.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for coming along this evening, and a special thank you to Mark for that amazing quiz. I'd like you to know that this bottle that I have brought on stage of special Spectator English sparkling wine is not for me, though there are plenty of bottles of English sparkling wine here, for the other members of the panel. This will go to the quiz winner. So whoever scored the highest amount in Mark's quiz will be going home with a bottle of Spectator English sparkling wine. But don't say we're not generous to all of you. Every single person here will also receive, thanks to the generosity of our sponsor, Charles Stanley, a free Charles Stanley umbrella on your departure. And everyone here is also welcome to come back to the Spectator's offices, 22 Old Queen Street, for drinks thereafter. I don't know what the throwing out time will be. I may well be in my bed by then, but hopefully not with anyone in this audience. I wanted to also say that we're going to make this evening, not just with the quiz, but in another respect, interactive. So we're going to invite you to vote on what is your political moment of the year. In a moment, I'll invite onto the stage Tim Shipman, James Heale, Madeline Grant, and Freddy Gray. But in order to make sure that you can vote, because unlike this government, we don't believe in cancelling votes, we believe in encouraging votes. Can you, please, I don't know, this is a QR code. If you can download this QR code now, if those of you who want to vote, as you do so now, and then we'll ask you a test question in just a second. This has been a great year for The Spectator, thanks to you, our readers. We now have a record number of subscribers, more than at any point in The Spectator's history. This is down to our brilliant team of writers, also to the feedback that we get from you. And of course, it's also down to the amazing legacy that we inherited from Fraser Nelson, who was the immediately preceding editor. This just gives me an opportunity to say thank you to Fraser and thank you to the Spectator team for an amazing year. And this is the Christmas issue of The Spectator, which should be plopping through your letterboxes in the next 24 hours. It is a bumper issue. All of your favorite Spectator writers there, everyone on stage here in this magazine. And we also have 2 new guest columnists who are joining us for the first time. Her Majesty the Queen, Camilla, is writing exclusively for The Spectator, and also an up-and-coming young writer called Bonnie Blue. We'll see what she has to offer in the pages of the magazine. Highbrow, that's what The Spectator is. Anyway, so if you've downloaded your QR code, I think we can now have our first question. And our first question is a difficult dilemma. We have 2 politicians here. 2 politicians I know that Spectator readers love to read about. Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana. So please vote now. If you had to choose, who would make a better Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn or Zara Sultana? If you vote now, just a bit of fun, not binding. And we're counting down. That's wonderful. We got 241 votes in, and the result is Jeremy Corbyn. It's a Corbyn landslide. Just as well that didn't happen 6 years ago. Otherwise, I'd be in prison. Some people, I think, would probably say that would have been the only good thing about Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister. Who knows? Anyway, I now want to introduce our star Spectator writers. And here they are. Our political correspondent, James Heale. Our deputy editor, Freddy Gray. Our parliamentary sketch writer, columnist, and assistant editor, Madeline Grant. And our political editor, Tim Shipman. And we'll begin with James. James, do you want to tell us about your political moment of the year?
So my political moment of the year, I think, was probably the most important in terms of UK politics. There's also a bit of levity as well involved in it, which was the summer welfare revolt, in which suddenly, after about a year or so of being elected, a lot of Labour MPs, in the words of one government aide I spoke to, started thinking for themselves, and they started deciding they weren't too keen on all these welfare cuts, and there were £5 billion proposed in the Universal Credit Bill, and suddenly, all of a sudden, sort of the Viet Cong, 126 of them, had signed this so-called reasoned amendment, which would have killed that bill stone dead. As a result, there were all these kind of late-night discussions, the Labour Party turning on itself, and it was therefore, as a result of that, they had to pull the cuts. And so because of that, we now have a government which is sort of governing very much in coalition with its backbenchers, which it's very much despised over the past 5 years of the Starmer project. And I think the ramifications are going to still play out, where we are seeing on things like the proposals about juries, people still going out and attacking the new chief whip, Johnny Reynolds, for not being like the old one, Alan Campbell, who was axed as a result of these. So I think that in terms of the refashioning of the balance of power between the Prime Minister and his backbenchers and what it means for things like the government and its fiscal market position, the summer welfare revolt was one that had its moments of levity, but also has serious ramifications for this government.
James Heale, Deputy Political Editor. It is the welfare revolt that was his political moment of the year. And now over to the Deputy Editor of the magazine overall and Editor of our US edition, Freddy Gray. Freddy.
Yes, I'm afraid mine is a slightly odd one, I realise, particularly with the sort of Christmas, the Yuletide sentiment going on. I was hoping someone might flash it up on the screen, but maybe, could that happen? Is that going to happen?
The image?
The image? No?
Alas.
I'll have to describe it. This is going very badly. My moment of the year was, as I say, it is a bit odd, but I love moments where politicians betray the deep madness that they hold within their minds. And so my moment of the year was in February. Benjamin Netanyahu went to Washington. It was just after Donald Trump equally mad, had said that he wanted to make Gaza the Riviera of the Middle East. And Benjamin Netanyahu gave him a golden pager with a sort of olive tree background, olive tree mount. And the golden pager said, "Press with both hands." And then it was to Donald Trump, the greatest president, and blah, blah, blah. And what I found so extraordinary about that is the sort of tastelessness of it, firstly. I mean, this was obviously a very successful operation. You know, nobody's going to mourn the Hezbollah leaders that were killed. They were terrible people. But there was, a child was killed in it or something. 2 children, in fact. And you think, this is what Benjamin Netanyahu wants to give to Donald Trump as a sort of gesture of love. And the funniest part of it was some of the Trump people thought it was a threat. They thought that Netanyahu was saying he was going to take out Trump unless he did what he was going to do. And my final point in it is the best bit is in return, Netanyahu just got a signed picture from Donald Trump saying, "You're a great leader." So the handing over the pager is my golden moment.
And Maddie, what was your political moment of the year?
Okay, if I'm honest, my political moment occurred approximately 8 minutes ago when I saw that someone had replied to the question about what gets brought to the Oval Office, Russian hooker. But I guess I'm not allowed to have that because I need a fuller explanation. My moment is probably the resignation and associated lamentations of Angela Rayner. Just, when was that, a few weeks ago, not long ago, a couple of months ago. Basically, the reason I loved it so much was that it paved the way for one of the great, completely graceless, non-apologies, moments of anti-contrition that I've ever seen in the House of Commons since I've been a sketch writer. At no point did Rayner in her speech acknowledge any of the reasons why she had been sacked. It was all stuff about my socialist principles, and it's like, I don't think Marx and Engels wrote anything about having a holiday home in Sussex. So that in itself was brilliant, but also the number of people who had turned out from not just the Labour backbenchers to cheer her on, but also the big beasts, if you can call them that, of the Labour cabinet. You had Lammy there and Bridget Phillipson and Rachel Reeves in solidarity, and it was just underlined not only the innate hilarity of the apology, but for me also the weakness of Sir Keir's position, because what should have been a moment of a bit of introspection for her had actually become a potential new leadership rally for Rayner, which is what it really was. So it was a great bit of anti-contrition, a leadership bid dressed up as humble pie.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yes.
And Tim, your political moment of the year.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I hope you all got your fizzy cough mixture on the way in from the advert. I've only been served with red wine this evening. I would have perhaps gone with what James said, but going forth is more difficult. So I was concerned about doing this particular moment because it contains a little profanity, but after the Russian hooker and the suggestion that the bloke who shot Trump was actually a rent boy, I think you're in a reasonably robust form. So picture the scene, if you will. It's November the 17th in the House of Commons. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has announced a series of tough rules on asylum. She's going to change the way refugee status works so you don't keep it permanently. Once your country is safe to return to, you must return to it. And up stands a chap called Max Wilkinson of the Liberal Democrats, the MP for Cheltenham, the kind of place that is only invaded once a year for the horse racing, and has little knowledge of outside encroachment. And he criticised Shabana Mahmood, saying that to claim the country, it's not helpful for the Home Secretary to claim that the country is being torn apart by immigration. Acknowledging the challenges facing our nation is one thing, but stoking division using immoderate language is quite another. Well, he got what was coming to him, because up stood the Home Secretary and said, I wish I had the privilege of walking around this country and not seeing the division that the issue of migration and the asylum system is creating across the country. Unlike him, unfortunately, I am the one who is regularly called a fucking packy and told to go back home. And on she went, my own experience, the system's broken, we all need to acknowledge that. And this for me was just a great indelible moment. Migration has been the big political issue of the year, and I think the reaction to this moment showed you how far that famous Overton window has moved. I think it's almost impossible, unless you're a member of the left wing of the Labour Party, to have a migration policy that is now too tough. 70% of Labour voters agree with Shabana Mahmood, 57% of Lib Dem voters agree with her, and 49% of the Green voters agree with her. Now, the MPs couldn't disagree more, but this shows that she has now captured the sort of, what is the political common sense centre ground on this issue, and this moment completely said, I'm a woman of colour, I'm here doing this, and you, poncy southern idiot, don't have a clue what you're talking about. Compare that then with her leader, Keir Starmer, who tried and failed to make the same arguments earlier in the year, gave a tough speech, but he then claimed later he'd barely read it, he didn't like it very much, and he sort of disappeared. And this sense that Starmer has no sort of fundamental political views, no backbone, along has come Mahmood and kind of drawn attention to that. She's trying to deal with hotels. She's now, I mean, I've been writing about politics for 25 years, and for that entire time I've been hearing that we should have 12 police forces in this country, and no one has tried to do anything about it until this week. She's going around the Home Office whispering in the ears of civil servants saying, it's Shabana-geddon. Good for her, we say. And that's about this year. But this political moment will also tell you about next year, because the big issue next year, at least after May, is going to be the leadership of the Prime Minister and whether he clings on to his job. Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, Ed Miliband, we're all told, are circulating and could take this position. Well, I say to you, if Shabana Mahmood gets this stuff right, put your cheeky £10 Christmas bet on her. Don't waste money on the Grand National. I don't know what the odds are at the moment. At the moment, she's a long shot. But when all this lot are getting the attention, if she gets on and achieves anything like what she's promised, then this is going to be a very interesting year in 2026 for Shabana Mahmood.
Thank you.
We're going to get on Betfair.
Now,
Cool.
what are the odds?
I didn't realise it was a tip.
I think our tech wizards have now enabled the opportunity for all of you to vote, but you may well want to hold back, see how the discussion goes before plumping for a particular moment of the year. But from what Tim said, and it's striking that all of the domestic political moments that have been chosen have been about Labour woes in different ways. From what Tim said, Tim's assumption, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, which I often am, is that on balance, Starmer will probably go next year, and that there'll be a Labour leadership election, indeed a new Prime Minister, and Tim's given Shabana Mahmood not the endorsement, but certainly he's pointed out that she's probably underpriced in the betting markets at the moment. So I'm going to ask every member of the panel broadly what they think of Keir's chances of survival. Should he? Does he deserve to? Will he anyway? And who they think should or will take over from him within the Labour Party, if indeed there's anyone who stands out. And I'll begin with Maddie.
Well, I think if Starmer does go, then it'll probably be Rayner. I mean, I mentioned the resignation speech, which was basically reframed as a kind of "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" kind of Eva Peron mourning ritual. I think that she could get such a turnout for her resignation. It shows the level of support, and I think that number of people showing up at that moment in the Commons was a bit of a rebuke to her boss for having sacked her. So I think in terms of parliamentary support, I've heard a fair bit about Ed Miliband possibly doing a run, which is quite terrifying, but he has said that he really doesn't want to have another go, and I know that they do often say that, but he's kind of said it repeatedly more than he needed to. So my assumption would be, barring some turnaround, Starmer kaput and Rayner comes in.
And James, what's your hunch?
Well, Sir Keir is obviously a very keen Remainer, so I'll give him odds of 48-52 in terms of survival. I think that Labour are on course to finish third, not just in Wales, but in Scotland too. And if that happens, it's going to be very difficult to see what can be done to turn that around, because you look around the world, you see that there's nothing really going to we're not going to rediscover North Sea oil as a thing which sort of helped bail out Thatcher. We're not going to have a Falklands for him to retake. The economy is sort of trundling along at 1% or thereabouts. And so I think that at that point, so many mistakes have been made so soon into this government that it may well be the case that someone like Rayner, who will be untainted being outside the cabinet, a bit like Boris Johnson was in 2019, I think is probably best placed to succeed him.
Freddie?
Well, as the Westminster expert on the I mean, my pet theory is that Starmer will survive because of the cliche, which is that Labour are very, very bad at killing their own leaders, unlike the Tories, Michael. Can you tell us a bit about that? I think he'll still be here this time next year, which is such a depressing thought. I'm sorry. But I think he will survive.
Yes. If he went, is there, who, and I were to press you, who do you think might take over? Is there anyone who you would think would be tolerable or better in broad terms, and anyone who you think would be even more terrifying who's in with a chance?
Within Labour?
Within Labour.
I don't really find Starmer terrifying, just depressing.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Wes Streeting, I suppose. Still pretty grim, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's about as optimistic as I get.
Okay. I will use a traditional method of voting, which is everyone raising their hand. So I'll ask the members of this elite audience, hands up those of you who think Starmer will be out next year. So I think that's almost half, or about 40% to half. And then we've had various sort of nominations here for people who should take over, or not necessarily should, might take over. No endorsement, merely prediction. So between Shabana Mahmood, Angela Rayner, and Wes Streeting, that's the choice I'll give you. Hands up those who think, well, of that trio, Shabana Mahmood.
Is this would like or will win?
Yeah, would like, actually. Would like, yeah. Those who think, well, of that trio, I'm voting for Angie.
Come on, guys, think of the sketch writers.
Great. And then those who think, well, actually, do you know what? Of those three, Wes Streeting is the best. Ooh. Okay, that is interesting. I think that has Shabana winning on the first ballot, but a good showing by Wes and some fanatical Angela Rayner supporters out there.
They must be parliamentary sketch writers.
Yeah, certainly. But that is interesting. Anyway, we're now going to have, I hope, joined by video, we're going to have a virtual recitation of Political Moment of the Year from Spectator columnist Matthew Paris. So Matthew...
My favourite political moment by far was the Chancellor of the Exchequer bursting into tears. That moment when tears were running down Rachel Reeves's cheek was just absolutely priceless. And the impertinence of her complaining about mansplaining and misogyny and that kind of thing, when she was given so much sympathy and tolerance for her tears. Imagine if a male Chancellor of the Exchequer had burst into tears sitting next to the Prime Minister. He'd be finished, he'd be toast. But she was extended all kinds of kindness, and the message to Rachel is you can't have it both ways.
Rachel's tears. Now, Maddie, did you feel sympathetic, or did you feel something else when you saw Rachel crying?
Well, I think fair play to her, because she totally secured the bag. I mean, you can't sack her after that. And then the markets went haywire, so it was a very good opportunity for her to say, look what happens when I even look like I'm flagging a bit. You know, I'm the best thing for the economy since the creation of the Bank of England in the 1690s or whatever. You must keep me on forever, kind of thing. So from that perspective, fair play to her. Did I feel sympathy? Yeah, it was really hard not to at that moment, especially because the Prime Minister's response was quite kind of unfeeling and graceless. He didn't kind of seem to acknowledge what she was experiencing. He just kind of, and then Kemi Badenoch gave him the opportunity to assure her position, which he didn't take, and then the crying kind of intensified at that point. It's like quite a lamentable display, really. But you never want to, pity is probably the last thing a politician wants you to feel for them, you know.
James, I'm going to be a terribly crusty reaction. I can't imagine Dennis Healy or Randolph Churchill, or Derek Heathcote Amory having a bit of a sob on the front bench. Am I right to think, you know, all accusations which I'm sure will be thrown at me of sexism, misogyny aside, am I right in thinking it's just a bad sign, #decline, that the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Master of the Monarch's Mint is reaching for the Kleenex on the front bench?
Well, I think Dennis Heale would probably make someone else cry.
Yes.
But I can't exactly see that happening. I think on the first point, just to say, I mean, after that display where she was crying and a few hours later the Prime Minister's spokesman rushed out this statement defending her, we all thought the following week all the cabinet would be there, weeping tears into Kleenex, you know, sort of securing their jobs that way to get the much fabled vote of confidence by the Prime Minister. But yeah, I mean, we've had some lachrymose Prime Ministers. Churchill was a bit of a blubberer, but I mean, he could back it up. Whereas I think that what we've discovered this year with our first female Chancellor is that women can be equally as mediocre in the Treasury as men.
And Freddie, do you think well, whether or not you're a spectator, reader, or subscriber, or a member of the public, do you think that actually this display of vulnerability, this new sense that inevitably is associated with the moment that Matthew chose, do you think that's a welcome example of our politics becoming more relatable?
No, I think the worst part is that you say, you know, can you imagine all these men crying? And of course everyone goes, no, no. The worst part is if a man did cry, the media narrative for 4 days would be, isn't it great that men are now willing to sob and to show their emotion publicly? And the truth is neither men nor women should cry in public. Although I am very interested that Matthew Parris, who's the kindest, gentlest person I know, his favourite moment of the year is watching someone cry.
No. Yeah, and he kind of described it with a certain amount of bloodlust as well. Yeah. It didn't help that the lights went down and there were just these red beams.
But Tim, whether or not that was, you know, whatever the reasons, and again, every individual is entitled to an element of privacy, of course. Nevertheless, do you think, as Maddie hinted, that Rachel Reeves actually consolidated her position in a way, partly because the bond market suggested that if this was a prelude to her departure, then anyone else would be worse? And do you think that even though the budget was obviously in its run-up, and indeed the second before it was delivered was overshadowed by leaks, that she sort of consolidated her position in the Labour Party as a result? Do you think that she's actually in a stronger position than many would allow?
Totally. This was the best thing that happened to her all year. And actually, it's a perfect example. I think Maddie's been very unkind to Keir Starmer. This was an example of Keir Starmer's political genius. He's sitting there, this woman is crying her eyes out. Keir, who, let us not forget, is a football fan, he has brilliant peripheral vision. He's a midfield general when he's playing. He knows exactly where everyone is. He can lace a ball through this way or that way. He sees the defenders coming up, ready to chop him down. He's got 360 degrees. He knew exactly what was going on. And he ignored her. And when Kemi Badenoch said, do you stand by this woman? Do you have full confidence in the crying woman? And he was completely oblivious, didn't give an answer, and this was the best thing he did all year, because the markets went into total meltdown and said, we cannot have this dreadful, awful Chancellor of the Exchequer, but all the other people are even worse. And that has now become sort of embedded in the view of the City of London. You know, before that, everyone was beginning to conclude that everything Rachel Reeves had said in opposition, where she went and ate all the rubber chicken and talked to all the people in the city and said, we won't raise your taxes and it's all going to be absolutely fine, and half of them believed her, they had decided that she basically lied to them. After this, they were like, we've got to keep the lying woman because otherwise it's going to get even worse. And, you know, after that, it's just, you know, the thought of Ed Miliband eating a bacon sandwich at the dispatch box whilst announcing 100% tax, you know, on North Sea oil or whatever it was he'd do, left to his own devices, it's just too terrible to contemplate. And yeah, this was, you know, don't ever say Starmer is not a political genius, because this was his key moment.
You heard it here first. And our next guest contributor, James Cleverly.
Angela Rayner stepping down is my political event of the year. She managed to trigger a hasty reshuffle. she managed to keep her dignity intact and her popularity with the Labour grassroots intact, but more importantly, she managed to keep her hands clean when it comes to that car crash budget. So I still think she is a sensible investment for long-term political returns, if you're on the left, but her standing down was my political event of the year.
Well, that is a surprise external endorsement of your position, Maddie, from James. And I think it's also interesting that James, who knows a thing or two about leadership contests and how they can go right and indeed how they can go wrong, has a shrewd sense of how Angela Rayner's positioned herself within the Labour Party. And again, I think this is something that you touched on, Tim. There can sometimes be a tendency for those of us outside a political party to assume that a particular course of action is rational. But within a party, there are all sorts of sentiments, emotions, tribal feelings that mean that they don't necessarily act in a way that outsiders might consider to be in their best interests.
Yes, I mean, that happens all the time. The other thing I was just reflecting on, actually, was that when Rachel Reeves went out crying, she should never have been let out by her staff. And a terrible mistake was made, and she now acknowledges that she shouldn't have gone out. And guess what's happened today? One of the people who sent her into the chamber that day has just become a baroness. Prizes for failure in British politics. Triumphant. But yes, no, I mean, you're absolutely right, Michael.
I remember there's the old injunction which was attributed to nannies, or indeed to your relative if you weren't the bride, which is nobody's looking at you, dear. And the idea that the attention should always be elsewhere. When I was a politician, took that literally, and I very rarely turned up to Prime Minister's questions when I was in government. I would hide in my office. Not because I was weeping, for sometimes I was close to it, but because I thought that exactly, but because I thought that you run the risk on the front bench, even if you're not weeping, of being essentially one of the Muppets that the leader of the opposition points to at a particular moment when something has gone wrong.
Were you also concerned that you'd written half the jokes for the leader, and if they didn't deliver them as well as you, it would be just ghastly to watch this other moron just kind of delivering your jokes?
And that's the thing about, and that's why I agree with Tim. Rachel Reeves didn't need to be there. So, you know, it's always the case that in politics, what you don't do can sometimes be the subject of speculation, but it's not necessarily damaging, is what you do and the images that you may create or generate to be hung around your reputation, which can be problematic. James.
To say, I mean, the bit about the front bench reminds me of, I think, my favourite line in a Madeline Grant sketch this year, which was when you described the poor people who have to stand behind the Prime Minister at these endless Monday morning press conferences, which you liken to a Greek chorus.
Oh, yes.
Silent, mute, and yet the expression is written all over their face. And I think we saw a perfect example of this week at the McLaren, where obviously these guys have been out, presumably having a few too many shandies over the weekend, and then they have to come in 8 a.m. Monday morning to listen to Keir Starmer give a press conference and tell them how wonderfully they've all done. I mean, he is basically like a Dementor from Harry Potter, just sucks all the life out of anything. And I think that has an echo with the PMQ's front bench as well.
And they have a way of picking off on a particularly disgruntled-looking person to stand directly next to him or behind him. On the campaign trail in 2024, I remember there was a woman who was so obviously bored by what Rishi Sunak was saying that she began sort of jigging, hopping from foot to foot with boredom, sheer boredom, and her face was darting around the room. And meanwhile, he was being very earnest in the foreground, and all you could see was this kind of great whirligig of tedium that was right behind him.
Yeah, is there still in America any sort of political equivalent of the politician turning up and then having this sort of staged group of stooges behind him?
No, I think they've given. I mean, we're always so far behind, aren't we, in Britain? I think in America they've kind of given up on that because it's such a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
And they've got so much better at the showmanship of it. So you will occasionally get the kind of rally. Faces behind. But no, they're never seen with anyone who might potentially be a rival.
Yes.
In any major broadcast moment.
For attention or interest.
Because they're not stupid. No. Yeah.
Let's go to our final outside contributor, to Spectator columnist Lionel Shriver's moment of the year.
I don't know whether this is exactly my favorite political moment of 2025, but it's certainly the most bizarre. And that was the meeting between Zoran Mandami, the mayor-elect of New York City, and Donald Trump in the Oval Office. They have every reason to hate each other. During the mayoral campaign, Mamdani called Trump a fascist. Trump called Mamdani a lunatic. So it didn't make any sense that they were all buddy-buddy, and Trump was patting Mamdani's arm and saying attaboy as if the guy were a dog, while Mamdani was gooning beside the desk and looking like the cat who ate the canary. It was a veritable menagerie. So the question was, who got over on whom? Who was condescending to whom? It was baffling.
Freddie, do you think that Trump was right, from his point of view, to invite Mamdani into the Oval Office and, in effect, to adopt him as a sort of third son?
Well, I think there is some sort of procedural thing where New York mayors do go to the White House, but I mean, I wrote this very bad newsletter. I'm sorry if anyone receives the Americano newsletter, but I wrote this very bad newsletter about it in the morning where I was sort of trying to say, oh, will they have a fight? Will they actually get on surprisingly well? But I knew the answer in my heart was that they'd get on surprisingly well because Donald Trump always tries to get on with everyone. It's just a fact. Every single major leader he meets, particularly if they're supposed to get on, with the exception of Zelensky, pretty spectacularly, and Cyril Ramaphosa. So I'm losing my own thesis here.
But they're the exceptions that prove the rule.
But they are the exceptions that prove the rule. But I just sort of knew that him and Mamdani were going to just hit it off, partly because it's all about New York. You know, Trump's sort of threatening to withhold all these federal dollars that would be going to New York. They obviously had a conversation about that. They came up with some kind of arrangement. And then they had this extraordinary love-in. And what was touching about it was watching all the Trump guys who'd spent ages writing these agonizingly angry messages about how awful Zoran was. He was a communist, he's awful, he's the worst person in the world, he's going to destroy New York. And then have Trump say, I like this guy so much. He's one of the nicest guys, you know, and it's classic Trump.
It suits them both, though, doesn't it, to build each other up, and it suits Trump to have Mamdani as the sort of leader of the Democratic Party going forward. If you do think he's a lunatic communist, it's better to run against that next time, whoever your successor is.
Yes,
and they're the same in so many ways.
But the weirdness is Trump, you know, hopes to exploit the fact that most of America say he's a radical communist while saying, no, he's actually a nice guy. And that's
it's the same as when I interviewed Nigel Farage a week or so ago. That's in the Christmas issue of the magazine. And I asked him about...
I do hope that you're enjoying the Year in Review, but if you want to continue watching, you'll have to be a Spectator subscriber. If you're still not signed up, fear not, you can subscribe in seconds and get 3 months for £3. Head to spectator.co.uk/live and don't miss another moment.